So, tanks.
Leopards,
Yes.
hundreds,
Release the leopards.
10 of them,
Why aren't there?
14.
Huh?
14, right?
14 tanks. Are you joking me?
No, I'm getting confused. 14 Challenger tanks have been promised by
What we do? 14 tanks.
Blighty.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of talk about tanks. Obviously, we're talking about Ukraine here, and our recent, in the past week or so, at least publicly, a bit of a hysteria about get tanks to Ukraine right now. Everybody, except for America, because, you know, we only sell tanks to people for war. We don't really send them to... We want you to use your tanks, then you can buy our tanks, basically. So, Germany, you got all those Leopard tanks. They're not doing anything. And we've got some shiny new ones that we can sell you as a replacement. So, why don't you use them up in Ukraine there? And Germany's like, oh, you know, Berlin Wall. Well, even going back further, First World War, Second World War, didn't go well for us. Kind of Russia, who, you know, and then Berlin Wall, you know, country split. Yeah, and if we send a load of tanks, like a lot of tanks, hundreds of tanks, German tanks, that would be like German tanks fighting Russian tanks. I mean, that looks an awful lot like World War One and Two again. I mean, just don't like it. I'm sorry, Mark, don't like it. I'm like, shut up and send the tanks now. What are you?
Well, the British are clear what he is. The Telegraph this week described him as a gutless coward.
Oh, there you go.
It's very clear to them. Again, pushing Germany into the war with Russia, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's history repeats. And the pressure is insane, though. It's of all the campaigns last year, right now, the pressure against Germany is at max.
Yeah. Well, there's a rare piece of, on this topic, a rare piece of objective, reasonable news from CNN, of all places, talking about the Ukraine war, and I was like, holy shit, what's going on? They're actually making sense. If you just throw that one up there, we want to go down to anyway, if you just scroll slowly through it, you'll see, well, they diss German Russian tanks, T-72s, and say, yeah, Leopards would be far better. They need to send Leopards. Why aren't Germany sending Leopards? Leopard 2 is a modern, well-protected main battle tank with good sensors, said some American dude. And but if you just scroll down there, where is this funny comment? It's after the picture of the T-72. So it's just below that. After that, I think. Maybe it's not there. Maybe it's a second further on.
The Americans explaining why they won't be giving them the Abrams.
Yeah.
Well, you see, they're powerful but difficult to maintain.
Yes.
Also, it's expensive. We're not just giving it away. But Germany, go ahead.
Yeah. Wasn't that one? I'm looking for something particular. Maybe they moved it. Anyway. Maybe I got it from somewhere else. Let me see. Hang on. Brutal Spring Offensive. What's the title of that article? The Russian Offensive Looming. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, maybe I'll just tell you what it was. It was basically... I can't find it now. It was basically in a CNN article, the guy talking about, because in the article they talked about Germany's history with NATO and how much they'd, Germany's lackluster involvement with NATO, basically, at least in terms of paying its dues, and Trump complained about that, all these other countries not paying their dues, etc., etc.
It's specifically pacifist in its post-war constitution.
Right.
That was a requirement of freaking Nuremberg.
Yeah.
And now it's like, okay, Germany's a bitch, too peaceful.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a reason why we decided that.
Yeah.
2 world wars,
Yeah. But that doesn't matter to America, right? So, but this guy basically said that German defense has really been German defense budgets basically over the past X number of years and he said specifically it's really been a gift to our allies because it made them happy. I.e., Germany's not. We're not really. We haven't been a warlike country, let's say, or we haven't been on a war footing. We haven't been. We haven't really cared or bothered much about our defense industry. Because the unspoken agreement was post Second World War was that America would take care of international kind of global security with its ruling of the waves. After Britannia ruled the waves, then America ruled the waves after World War II, and particularly after fall of really after World War II. Yeah, they would ensure global security with its aircraft carriers, etc., and military bases all around the world. For European countries and other countries, I suppose. While Germany benefits from that, doesn't have to worry about defense spending, all that kind of stuff, or building up its military. America's taking care of that, and it gets cheap gas and oil from Russia for its industry, and cheap parts from China. And then Germany rules the global economy, not rules the global economy, but
European industry,
European industry, yeah. So that's why, and I mean, it's kind of strange for him to see it in black and white. That basically he said, yeah, I mean, our defense spending for quite a long time has basically been a gift to our allies, and by allies he means America, because it makes them happy. So we just spend a bunch of money on equipment, either some of it built, German industry, but a lot of it being bought from America. And we just keep it there, and we don't really use it much. I mean, we don't use it at all, really. We do a bit of training here and there, but we've just been slacking off on the whole defense thing for a long time. And that's
did he say long term or imply long term? Because that is basically the case. Germany has had no real military to speak of since World War II for real reasons. But there's a trend that began under, guess who the former defense minister of Germany was for 6 years? Just before this, Ursula von der Leyen.
Yeah.
And she slashed military budgets, like as pitiful as they were, by 2/3 or something. I mean, she decimated it. That, they said, was, depending on what article you're reading, Der Spiegel might have said that was just terrible. But Washington press was like, that was her best contribution. Before, she basically, you've seen her up on stage with Joe Biden. I mean, she's America's #1 agent in Europe. And it's not a coincidence for me that she goes from that role into this for this current timeline,
Yeah.
So it's not that on the one hand, it looks like they're hoisted on their petard because they've made sure Germany has a limited capability, but they have some. I mean, they have industry. These Leopards are a significant purchase throughout Europe. Have you seen some of the figures? Part of the reason why this isn't just a token thing, it's being shaped as a token thing. And the British got the ball rolling and they said, we're going to send 14 Challenger tanks. And you're like, 14 tanks? What the fuck is that going to do? Nothing. That's the opening act, they hope, to pry Leopards out of Germany's hands. And at least another step to prying it out of Germany is the fact that there are about 1,500 of these Leopards among other European countries. Poland has several hundred. Greece, you may have heard about in the news this week. Russia warning Greece. No. Germany also backed that up. Greece bought 300 or so Leopards from Germany. And it's the same kind of contract as if when Russia says you can't be sending our weapons, Slovakia, for example, you can't be giving to Ukraine what we sold to you. That's breach of contract.
Right.
So
Poland has said they're going to go ahead and do it anyway. Or
they're threatening to, and they want Washington's okay for it, but Washington is now putting on the pressure to get a tacit agreement from Germany to do it. And Germany, they're holding fast to say no, because this will be the straw that breaks the camel's back, I think, where we go into the next phase, where Russia's description of this whole event since last year as a NATO proxy war against us becomes true. and everything else that comes with it.
Mm-hmm.
It means we can legitimately target your deliveries of these things, which I haven't done yet.
Mm-hmm.
They've hit trains with equipment on them once they reached roughly eastern Ukraine, past Kiev, past the Dnieper. But here you'd be seeing a wholesale, with video footage, attacks on deliveries.
Well, yeah, maybe that's definitely part of it. But I think part of the problem with Germany not wanting, like I mentioned it in a kind of funny way at the beginning of the show there, for Germany, there's something, the optics in this don't look very good. You know,
No.
Hundreds and hundreds of German manufactured, tanks doing battle with Russian tanks in Eastern Europe. It's just like, it's not going to look good. Germans just don't. I mean, there's all sorts of problems, with that image, and especially if they get their ass handed to them, you know what I mean, as well. Just, I found it there actually. Just throw it up and just search the word gift, GIFT. Yeah, so he says Germany has been on a peacetime footing for years. We don't have the expertise in procedure or procurement to do anything at speed right now. The truth is that for decades, we have seen our defense budget as a gift to our allies, i.e. America, because they thought it was important. This is the Deputy Director of the German Council on Foreign Relations.
Right. So we have deliberately not had a military to suit post-war arrangements. And now you're piling on the pressure for us, basically, not only to send, but presumably to give the whole support, expertise and procedure and procurement, i.e. to keep building them.
Yeah, and even before in the paragraph just above, experts say the reticence is partly born of Berlin's pragmatic approach to conflict in general and a relatively timid military posture going back decades, informed by what Scholz himself, that's the Chancellor, has described as the dramatic consequences of 2 world wars that originated in Germany. So you don't want to start another one? I mean, the third time's a charm, no? Germany can go for 3 strikes and you're out. I don't know. And then
this isn't even this isn't like Washington calling Germany and then it gets into the news. The setup for this last week was just underscores the whole point. This began with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the top military guy in the United States, Mark Milley, going to Ramstein Air Force Base, a massive American city, basically within Germany that they control completely, a military city, to do a press photo op of him personally inspecting the training of 500 Ukrainian troops at the American base in Germany.
It was an attaboy.
It was an attaboy. But then it became, the headlines were, Mark Milley gave a statement and he specifically said that he basically was calling on the German government to free the Leopards. So to give the okay for other countries like Poland and Greece to send theirs as well. So this is the top Pentagon guy in their, depending on how you look at it, their point of occupation or their garrison, their chief garrison in Europe, inside Germany. I mean, can you imagine like that? That wasn't by accident. They did that on purpose. That's setup.
Well, definitely it's definitely got echoes of World War II, and how, it's obviously not exactly the same or even close to it, but it's got echoes of it where the US kind of like, benefited greatly from World War II, contributed, a lot of weapons and financing to European countries to destroy each other, basically, with Germany as a boogeyman. And I mean, I it's like, I think there I wouldn't be surprised or if among in the halls and in the deep state in Washington DC, in the establishment, that they still have that attitude towards Germany, that, well, Germany's basically the enemy. It's still, it was only 80 years ago that it was actually the enemy. So like we gotta turn the screws in these people. You know what I mean? They don't have a good track record, and the Germany follows a policy of pacifism. Doesn't is a, how do you describe it there? Partly born of Berlin's pragmatic approach to conflict in general and timid military posture going back decades, as a dramatic consequence of 2 world wars that originated in Germany. So it's like, yeah, Germany has a history there of, it was a bad guy, and now it has an opportunity to redeem itself in the eyes of the international community in the West. by doing what's right in Ukraine, or for America and Ukraine, for American global leadership, maintaining American global leadership by making sure that Russia is defeated in Ukraine. Here's your opportunity to redeem yourself, you bunch of Nazis. So do it. And they're like, no, but that's not the same. You're actually asking us to do what we did in World War I and World War II. Not, do you know what I mean? And America's just do it, Germany, okay? Just do it. It'll be fine, I promise. And if anything goes wrong, I've got your back. See ya.
God, they are so cocked. They're in serious trouble. I mean, they're going to capitulate. That's my prediction.
They'll send them. Do you know how many tanks are estimated to be in that Russia has in reserve?
It's vast. It's just vastly. They're a land army. They're vast. I mean, Ukraine at the start had almost 3,000.
Yeah, they have 10,000.
10,000, yeah.
10,000 tanks. But what's interesting about this whole tank thing is, why are they pushing for tanks now? Why all the excitement about tanks? Tanks are just tanks, right? I mean, I'm sure they're sending more artillery and all that kind of stuff, but what's all the excitement about tanks? Why do we desperately need tanks right now? It's fairly simple. Why does Ukraine desperately need tanks?
This is to do with contracts for the US selling.
Well, that's obviously that's always there. That's where you never lose. That's where war is always good, right? Especially for the
CNN first article, you said in the headline, it said needs tanks now in preparation for spring offensive.
Right, a spring offensive
by Ukraine against Russian forces.
No, that's the twister. They're expecting a major spring offensive in the next month or so by Russia, which could be decisive. So we're talking about maybe, they're looking at maybe 150,000, well, total up to 500,000 Russian troops available after the last mobilization, and on different fronts. Maybe certainly the one in Belarus possibly going south and towards Kiev, or towards those supply lines in the west. Another one already started yesterday in Zaporizhia in the south. They started a new offensive there, and they're already getting ready to basically take Bakhmut, which cuts off the main road of supply line from towards eastern Ukraine. So there's three areas there of, the bottom, southeast, northeast, and then north central or northwest almost in Belarus. And you could have hundreds or possibly, maybe I won't go far to say thousands, but you never know. But definitely hundreds of Russian tanks and hundreds of thousands of Russian soldiers on 2, possibly 3 fronts moving into Ukraine. Russia has been particularly over the past few weeks, has been really over the past few months, but in particular over the past few weeks, I mean, Ukraine is having serious problems with artillery as well. Russian drones and counter-artillery strikes have been taking out a lot of Russian or Ukrainian artillery systems and stuff. So that's preparing the ground. You take out the artillery, you wear down the artillery system, Ukrainian artillery systems, and their HIMARS and their other Western supplied artillery systems, were those down to the point where they're not really a significant threat anymore, and then you can move in largely with impunity with tanks and infantry and other mobilized troops.
It sounds to me like Ukraine has no army and they need a new one.
Well, they already lost at least one, probably 2 armies. If you think about the waves over the past year, the Russian military has already defeated the Ukrainian military twice. And in the absence of, the first time they defeated them, that would have been the end of the war. They were resupplied, retrained, more mobilization, but obviously you can conscript and mobilize as many as you want. If you don't have the equipment to put in their hands or for them to fight effectively, then it's not going anywhere. So it's obviously been Western supply of weapons that have allowed that army to be an army again. So they've gone through 2 iterations of that. So basically the Russians have already defeated the Ukrainian military twice, and they're gearing up to do it for a 3rd time. And maybe this time it'll be decisive.
Yeah.
So it's great. It's a crazy situation, really.
On the point of artillery, well, this is a broader figure. I've heard McGregor use it several times now in recent interviews. Colonel McGregor, the retired American colonel, he thinks the firing rate between each side is 60,000 rounds. I think that's all types of ammunition. It's not just tank shells and
Artillery.
from guns and artillery. So it's grosso, anything fired, 60,000 per day versus about 6,000. And I thought, well, I better check that out. Where's he getting that from? I actually found it. Kiev Post in November, citing a NATO official estimate. Ukrainian side, indeed, 6,000 to 7,000 artillery rounds only, actually, per day. Whereas the Russians were firing 40 to 50,000 rounds per day. I presume also artillery.
Yeah, so it is artillery.
Oh yeah, it's artillery
It's
only.
not anything.
And what do those figures mean, right? For context, by comparison, Kiev Post writes, the United States produces only 15,000 rounds per month.
Mm-hmm.
The Russians are spending 60,000 a day. A day. The United States doesn't have the ability to match that alone. That's partly why it's pulling in as much as it can from everywhere. This isn't just pushing Europe into the war to save their butts, although that's definitely a part of it. They don't have capacity. Even the great military industrial complex, apparently, to keep up with this. Even the top Ukrainian soldier, Zaluzhny, he gave the same figure earlier as well in August. So this NATO guy wasn't just pulling it out of his rear end. He said 60,000 rounds daily spent by the Russians. Okay, let's say this level was fired on just 300 days of the last 11 months of the war, right? That's 18 million by the Russians. No one else has the industrial capacity, never mind the stocks to keep up with that.
It probably wasn't every day.
No, of course not. No.
But still a large number. Yeah. The thing people have to remember about this kind of conflict is it's like that. I don't know who it was quoted as saying this. He was asked somebody who was a wealthy person and then a famous person who's wealthy and then lost it all. And he was asked how he became bankrupt. And he said gradually and then all at once. Gradually and then suddenly or something like that,
Yeah.
which is, how this war will, really end.
Yeah.
Or how it has been proceeding, obviously gradually, and then at some point it will just end quite suddenly,
Yeah.
But it's been slow, and people are like, what about Kiev in 3 days and all that bullshit, all the propaganda that they come out with? Here's a look at just some of the short video of some of the fortifications, of the Ukrainian fortifications in eastern Ukraine. And again, in case people don't know, most of the Ukrainian military was that was built up over the past 8 years since the coup in 2014, built up effectively by NATO countries, by the US, trained, armed, funded, etc. It was they were on their intent was, like I think we mentioned this last week, the contact line, or the lines where they dug in essentially these troops over the past 8 years and built fortifications, was on the border essentially with eastern Ukraine, with Donbass, which makes it very clear that their intent was to
move into just those
move
places.
in there. I mean, they made it clear, they made those statements themselves, that they left people in no doubt that their intent was to take back Donbass after the conflict, or after the DPR and the LPR declared independence in 2014, 2015, and Russia took Crimea. The Kiev junta made it very clear over the years since then that their intent was to take those back. And then they go and they train, arm and fund, with the help of NATO, obviously, large numbers, hundreds of thousands, up to 500,000-600,000 troops. With
was it really that many?
Yeah, not all in the one line, not all there, but they had mobilized that, or they had that. That was the number of their standing army, let's say, or that they had built up over the
how many NATO trainers do you need for that?
Well, no, I mean they had a regular army as well. They weren't brought.
They don't need to bring all of them to training camp. They just bring
they had a regular military long before that. But anyway, they're on they move onto the line, and build these fortifications. And here's an example of the fortifications, just to give you an idea of what you think. You think it's trenches? It's a lot more than trenches. Yeah.
Concrete bunkers.
Как вам тут в украинских апартаментах живется?
Потихонечку.
Ну, как все сделано, расскажите, вот как вы тут обживали?
Ну, как облагородили, все поубирали и потихонечку проживаем. Ничего не вот, печка.
Покажи,
Yeah, these
куда
are like
дымоход выходит.
not trenches; they're
Вот дымоход выходит наверх.
fortified underground
Bunkers.
concrete, reinforced concrete bunkers, basically.
О, нормально? Да, все отлично.
Their beds and their heating systems and all that kind of stuff, and wood burning stoves. You know, so I mean, you know, look at
And
those doors. You
steel
know,
reinforced doors.
you know, so those kind of things aren't. You see here. That's not a trench, you know. That's an underground bunker, basically, and there's many of those along that line. And again, they had 8 years to develop this.
Yeah, this is probably what the Russian MOD, when they do their daily briefings and they refer to a military outpost was hit, that talking about this, or a local command center.
Right. Yeah.
It's de facto a structural, you know, a building,
Yeah.
underground building.
And there's hundreds of those, you know what I mean? And they're maybe 20 kilometers deep, you know? There's multiple lines of fortifications like that are 20 kilometers deep in different areas, you know what I mean? So it's not something, you know, the Russians aren't just going to run in there and, you know, end up with mass casualties, you know what I mean? They go very slowly, and they're obviously their main focus was to reduce Russian casualties, you know, and they realized that with these kind of fortifications, if they didn't go carefully, and they were going to incur a lot of casualties. So that's why it's been slow, let's say. I mean, it's been slow because
the US set it up that way.
it was set up. Ukraine was set up. The Ukrainian military was dug into fortified positions that were no army in the world would have been able to quickly deal with. You know, this is, remember the highway of death. Compared to the highway of death in Iraq, or the turkey shoot, or the shooting fish in a barrel type thing, as in the first Iraq War, and the second one really was described. Where you just had long lines of Iraqi equipment, military equipment, just driving an open desert down an open road. And you just had American planes going along, blowing them up, shouting "Yeehaw!" You know. I mean, people use that as a reference for this. I mean, it's ridiculous. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. People joined the show at the point long after America set the stage.
Right.
Interesting. Set the stage is a term that was used by the top Marine Corps officer in Japan last week. Maybe get into later, to describe how they are, quote, the Americans are setting the stage in Japan for a future war with China. So, yeah.
And Boris turned up bizarrely. Boris turned up. And Boris is just a member of parliament now, you know. He's not prime minister or anything. He's turned up in Bucha today. That's actually when I hear, he's such a, God, very low quality tyrants these days, you know what I mean? Low quality politicians and petty tyrants. Here's Boris, just showed up, and he showed up in Kiev on his own dime, basically. It wasn't an official visit, wasn't private, wasn't public, wasn't official, anything. Nobody knows. He just showed up. He's just an MP, you know, riding on the wave of "I used to be prime minister" type thing. And he was made an honorary citizen of Kiev by those two silly boxers, the Klitschkos. Just play it there, and you can get a feel for the nonsense.
Can you fix that off? Whoops. Thank you very, very much. Well, there you go. Is it on? Yep. Thank you very, very much, Mr. Mayor Vitaly. Thank you very much, Vladimir. Wow, that's my passport. Thank you very much.
I got a passport too.
Look, I just want to say what a huge honour this is. I first met Mr. Mayor many years ago when I was
Mr. Mayor.
And he came to see me, and he said, "Come to Kiev," and I did when I was Foreign Secretary. And you very kindly gave me a tour of your city, your beautiful, beautiful city. and I talked to many Ukrainians, and I realized then that if Putin was ever so mad as to invade Ukraine, that Ukrainians would fight and that they would win. And that is what is going to happen. Yes. And there is no doubt in my mind at all that Putin has made a catastrophic mistake. And the only thing that we, in the Friends of Ukraine, have got to do now is to continue our support for Ukraine with tanks, with planes.
Planes too.
Whatever it takes. Financial resources.
Planes, trains, and automobiles.
Ukraine wins, and Ukraine is once again a free, sovereign, and independent European country.
European country. Like it always has been.
European country, like mine. Oh, well, Brexit. Well, whatever. We're still European.
Yeah.
Boris. That was actually in Davos, where he met Klitschko and then went on to Bucha.
That?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. And he was hounded by a Sky News reporter, fair play to him. He pursued him in Davos saying, what are you doing here, Boris? Oh, no. He kept walking. What is he doing there? Didn't want to say.
Yeah. Just a lowly MP, no? Yeah, speaking of Davos. Well, anyway, that's Ukraine. Before we get on to Davos, that's Ukraine. We have to wait and see, as usual. But...
Oh, wait, there's a few more updates from Ukraine. What about this helicopter that killed the interior minister's entire team?
Oh, yeah.
I love how that was breaking news, and they were starting to suggest that they'd been shot down by the Russians, and then they dropped it like, oh, potato. It's just gone out of the news. It was an accident officially, but you have to wonder.
Well, they blame Russia.
Cabinet ministers have been shot in the head in that country.
Interior minister, yeah. Pretty high-level politician, obviously, interior minister. And that was the day after, or a day or two after, Arestovich, that erstwhile advisor to Zelensky, who is known for known for sticking his foot in his mouth or dropping truth bombs, depending on how you look at it. Yeah. He resigned because he said that I think it when was it last Monday that the Russians fired another salvo of. Or was it was before
just
that?
Before,
anyway,
last weekend,
another salvo of missiles, and the one of the in Dnipro, we talked about it.
Yeah,
right?
we did. Yeah,
fell on a
because
hotel,
their air defense systems
blocks
are in the freaking cities,
right? And he basically said, yeah, it's because the thing fell down. We partly shot down the Russian missile, but both missiles then fell to the ground, and one of them fell on the apartment block and killed 20 people or something like that. And then he resigned because it was being presented across the media. And despite him saying that, it was still presented across the media as evil Russian missiles, evil Russians sent fire missiles deliberately at apartment building in order to kill a bunch of civilians. He said, nah, that's obviously not what happened. It was partly shot down, and it was more or less an accident in that sense, and then he had to resign, or he resigned, and he apologized. Oh, I said the wrong thing. I misspoke, or I shouldn't have said that. He never said it wasn't true. He just said, yeah, I shouldn't have said that.
I've since seen a clip of him saying that we basically lost this war.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Now he says, now he claims that he can, because he's an unofficial person, he can
reveal his true allegiance to Moscow.
Yeah, here he is. No, he can say what he wants now, but he was saying what he wanted anyway, apparently. So it led to him to have to resign. But here's post-resignation, what he's saying now.
И если все думают, это я сейчас не официальное лицо уже, могу говорить, что хочу. Если все думают, что мы гарантированно выиграем войну, то очень не похоже. С 14 числа уже перестало быть на это похоже. Очень сильно. Как вы думаете, оценку от Дуды, от президента Польши, что месяц, и не только он сказал про решающие месяцы, что вообще неизвестно, выживет ли Украина, она просто так была сказана, или он на основе какой-то информации говорил об этом?
Yeah, now that he's an unofficial person, he can say openly that Ukraine is going to lose. Because when he was an official person, when he was a politician and an official government position, he had to lie about it.
Yeah,
which is a reasonable
to keep people in the fight, to keep Ukrainians conscripted.
But now he's not. He's no. He's not. What he says isn't, or his paycheck isn't depending anymore on what he says. He says, yeah, it's. looking pretty bad for Ukraine, and even the Polish Prime Minister Duda said that these were decisive months. And does he mean decisive in what way? I mean, it's not looking good for us. And is he saying that based on some information that he knows?
It all looks like there've been a few other truth-some-ish analyses, even on CNN and places. It all looks like they're starting to acknowledge. Well, there's two things going on. On one hand, they seem to be acknowledging the reality that it's over or it's approaching the end. On the other, there's a massive drive to increase the scale and intensity of weapons that are sent to Ukraine and the training in Ramstein and elsewhere. What do you think there's a clear goal for the Americans here? Can you formulate
clear goals right
goal?
here? What's her name? Army General Laura Richardson. U.S. Army General Laura Richardson. She's actually a woman. She's not a transgender man. Here's what she has to say. Don't know why it's that big, but whatever.
Adversary in the region, Russia. I mean, I've got, of course, the countries, Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua with Russia relationships, but what I really look at, and 6 other countries, by the way, so a total of 9 that have Russian equipment in them, and we're working to replace that Russian equipment with United States equipment if those countries want to donate it to Ukraine or the cause that's happening, and be able to replace that with U.S. equipment.
Yeah, so I'm actually a sales representative for Raytheon and Northrop Grumman and Boeing. And I'm going around to Latin America touting how great our weapons are. And I know you've got some weapons, but it just so happens that those are Soviet weapons, and the Ukrainian military only knows how to operate Soviet weapons. So if you wanted to donate or, give, I'm sure you'd be reimbursed those weapons. Well, you won't be reimbursed, but if you wanted to donate those weapons to Ukraine, to the poor Ukrainian freedom fighters, to bolster their fight against Russia, then we would happily replace them with shiny new American weapons. Of course, there may be some strings attached, not least of which would be...
We can control the weapons back through the back door.
Well, there's also the fact that you would need personnel on the ground, you'd need installations and that
advisors
kind of stuff for repair and maintenance of these weapons. So...
It's just mind-blowing, isn't it? That she's talking about Cuba here.
Cuba,
Venezuela. We tried to overthrow you 3 years ago, but hey, it's just business.
Yeah.
They're like aliens. Everyone else has she talked about relationships. Everyone has relationships where, look at what happened between Turkey and Russia. 2016, was a touch and go. Russia did sanctions for a while. They met a few years later and it was okay. We'll get back to talking. Stuff happens and things change and you barter. Americans are like, at least the American people like that, establishment types, they'll try to overthrow you one day and the next just kind of make you an offer you can't refuse. But to the public, she'll say, like, matter of factly, well, you've got Russian weapons, so just give them over there and we'll give you these.
It's very mafia-esque.
Oh, it's crazy. But said in a bland corporate speak.
Just
matter of course.
Matter of fact, yeah. This is just the way things are, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's what America... Your question was, what's America's goal? That's America's goal.
It's a self-perpetuating war machine.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the bottom line. That'll keep it going anyway. There are other reasons on top of it, other agendas being served on top of it, but the baseline for any conflict is that war is good for business and good for the economy, especially a war where you're actually only supplying the military hardware and someone else is doing the fighting and dying. That's a perfect war, and the longer you can keep that going, the better. Can you imagine, where you don't lose any individuals, all you do is pump weapons into it at a price, at a cost, right? You're selling weapons, large amount of weapons, to a country to go and fight someone that you don't like. How long do you want that to keep going?
Indefinitely. Yeah. Okay. Just final word, I suppose, to the Russian government. Peskov gave one brief statement about the transfer of all these tanks and whatever else. He said, if you send them, these will burn like the rest.
Mm-hmm. Which is fine. Those will just, they're German tanks anyway, right? And then we'll replace Germany's Leopard tanks with. Maybe we'll replace them with our tanks. We don't know. It might be better to have Germany completely out of ammo. America's. What I can't understand is how unable European countries are, particularly Germany, but other European countries, to realize just how much they're being screwed over by America. I mean, when you're being royally screwed, publicly screwed, and it's so obvious to everyone, how you can't go.
Here's the thing. I think they do realize this is from.
Well, why aren't they doing anything about it then?
Okay, well, here, let's have a listen or read of this. So this is a minor European country, one that will basically has a history of following whatever Big Brother Germany wants. NATO waging proxy war against Russia. Croatian president. Now, I don't think he has a big role. I think a presidency in that country is more like a foreign minister, the prime minister who really controls the country. So this person will be more free to say what he really thinks. Still, speaking about the Ukraine conflict, Zoran Milanovic said he doesn't want to be, quote, an American slave. He came straight out and said that this is NATO waging a proxy war against Moscow in Ukraine, dismissed the sanctions as nonsense, does not want to be an American slave. He went on to argue that the plan cannot be to remove Putin. The plan cannot be sanctions. Such punitive measures are nonsense, and we will not achieve anything with them. Scroll up a bit there. Oh, sorry, down. They go from war to war, and what should I be? An American slave? So, I mean, that is sentiment clearly simmering in Europe right now, and it's just burst forth a little here. Similarly, like Macron said some things this week. Again, he does from time to time. He has done this last year. He seems to be still in touch with reality, saying things like, I won't even put it up. He said last week in an interview with El País, Spanish newspaper, interesting because he's in Madrid or talking to a political people in Madrid, i.e. listen to what I have to say about this. He says, there will be no lasting peace if we do not contribute our part of the answer to this question. He was discussing Russia's destiny or its new role in the world. He once again warned the West against the desire to bring Moscow, quote, to its knees. Geography cannot be changed, i.e. France will still be on the same continent with Russia after this is over. I mean, you have to think long term. So this is eating at all European leaders right now. The sub-question, the follow-up one was what you just asked. Why don't or can't they do anything about it? I think it's to do with, we heard that American general, like the woman. I mean, they're aliens. These people are like, they have the goods on everybody. And I think they're not afraid to use them. Macron also was talking about he's mentioned it late last year as well. The way the world is overall splitting into two poles around whether they're pro-Chinese or pro-American. He was bitching about that. Why can't we, Europe, be independent? We need a militarily sovereign Europe. This has been reiterated multiple times in the last 2 decades by Jean-Claude Juncker before him, another Euro-federalist. They wanted the EU to be big and strong, but to be independent. But that's been completely pulled out from under them. They're floundering. Macron can keep saying this, but they're completely floundering. It's far too late. America's come in, and they got von der Leyen, who's clearly some kind of agent. She is a conscious co-conspirator with Washington, with her past, with her marriage, her relationships with Pfizer, her on two sides of her family. She's got British and Anglo-British settler in America, colonial slave plantation owners. She's from the House of Hanover. This woman is like, everywhere you look on her, like her connections, she is an American European. And Macron then does he understand himself that he is in opposition to her? but maintains smiley faces with her on the public stage. When you have someone like that in Brussels, you can keep saying this. You're not going to attract a political will to do anything about it.
Yeah.
And just to underscore this, so there's Macron telling El País in Madrid, for God's sake, can we stop doing everything the Americans want and sort of think for ourselves or enact it? On the 10th of January, the following happened. There was some kind of meeting in Brussels at the Council of Ministers, and they issued with NATO heads, so American generals were there meeting with von der Leyen and all the EU heads, and they issued the following NATO-EU joint declaration. And it's a lot of wiffle waffle. Totally, I know. But there is something in it that even Lavrov actually picked up on. He said, that's pretty concrete. So if you scroll down to do a search for billion, I think it's, there we go, 0.9. This is NATO and EU with one voice. Our mutually reinforcing strategic partnership, which has actually been a thing, a kind of a vehicle since the early 2000s, contributes to strengthening security in Europe and beyond. NATO and the EU play complementary, coherent, and mutually reinforcing roles in supporting international peace and security. Blah. We will further mobilize the combined set of instruments at our disposal, be they political, economic, or military, to pursue our common objectives to the benefit of our 1 billion citizens. You see what's happened here? It's one entity. The West, the walls are being built around the West. The EU has been, whether it was set out that way or not in the start, there was a lot of CIA, US interests, establishment interests post-World War II in creating what went on to become the European Union. But the entire time they've made sure it was either reined in or derailed whenever it went too independent. Because to go independent during the Cold War, they said, well, that's to go commie. That's to go towards Russia. So they associated with going commie then if you try to be too like de Gaulleist or something. Now it's different. They can't blame the communism part anymore, but they're just rapidly going ahead and building this cohesion around 8 billion people, not the Europe's 500 million.
No, what about the world policeman? NATO, I know it's the North Atlantic Treaty Organization in Europe and stuff, but I mean, they're speaking on behalf of America, and America is the world's policeman. 1 billion is only 1/8 of the world's population.
Well, they're closing ranks. This is where you get into, this is the references from Russia about the golden billion.
Yeah, but it's also that suggests it's we already live in a multipolar world then.
Yeah, so long as Europe is, the battle for this is to keep Europe in the American pole.
Yeah. But that's one of several poles. There's only 1 billion people. It's 12% of the world's population. They're making an explicit reference to common objectives to the benefit of our 1 billion citizens. That's all that interests them now. That's us. We're of course they're not really doing anything that's benefiting their citizens. They're doing the opposite, but to benefit their positions of power in the areas that they over which they rule, that's their main objective now. And the rest of the world is the enemy essentially. The other 7 billion is the enemy.
The jungle, as opposed to the garden, right?
Yeah, just throw this one up again. This is the one about on Germany. Just there was a couple of things I wanted to point out. Just search the word rust, R-U-S-T, on that topic of NATO unity. It's like acid, he said. It's like acid eroding. This is Germany's decision to not send tanks will likely go down badly with its allies, both in the immediate and long term. It's like acid eroding through layer after layer of trust, a senior NATO diplomat told CNN on Friday. Germany's hesitance would also have a lasting impact on the rest of Europe and potentially push other members of the alliance closer towards the US. Yeah. If they wish, basically, they hope. But if you just go down to what does Germany want, which is the part I was saying before, or yeah, keep going. Go down to a pivotal moment. The next one, just below that. It is often said in diplomatic circles that Germany's 21st century model for success has been built on 3 pillars: cheap Chinese labor, cheap Russian energy, and American guarantees of security. Many believe this well-known preference for diplomatic pragmatism and subsequent reluctance to pick sides will mean any defence reforms will be severely limited. One German official told CNN that it will be hard for mainstream politicians to break free from old habits. They have an inherent skepticism against siding overtly with the USA and a subtle hope that the relationship with Russia can be fixed. So, yeah, that's the problem with Germany.
Good intentions.
And the problem with NATO. And the fact that, there's obviously other things going on in the world. There's, we'll talk about that in a minute in terms of the more macro stuff, the World Economic Forum, people and what, who are the usual suspects, the ones who go from opining on Ukraine and sending tanks to Ukraine, etc., then pop up at the WEF and start talking about the future of the globe, basically, and the future of the world's citizens and how we're all going to live, and the new social order that is going to be ushered in. So it's there's more than just obviously Ukraine, but Ukraine seems to be the ultimate result of this Ukraine conflict, and primarily the US push has been, obviously from the beginning, pushing for the continuation of the prolongation of the conflict that is aimed at, or will ultimately, given that it will ultimately result in hard times for the European economy, and in that sense, a net downgrading of Europe as an economic powerhouse in the world. We have to assume that that's the intent. So the intent there, America's intent in pushing for the prolongation, or pushing for this confrontation with Russia in Ukraine, is as much directed against Europe as it is against Russia.
And for it to become/remain a supplicant of the US.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it wants it in a subservient position, basically. So America is fighting that, that's what I was talking about last week, about the Obi-Wan Kenobi
theory of US MAGA Congress.
Yeah. America has already pivoted towards going it alone. In a certain sense. Of course, it's going to exploit all of the influence it has accrued over the past 70 or 80 years over other countries in the world. It's going to exploit that to the max, but ultimately, we're not really friends anymore with anybody. Right. America's not even pretending to be friends with anybody anymore, because shit just got real. The world's going down the tubes. It's every man for himself. And, I'm not going to form alliances. I'm going to get what's best for us and for me at the expense of whoever, allies included. In fact, allies first, because they're easiest to exploit.
Yeah. And Germans just lack the guile or something. Well, like I said, that maybe they do know, but they lack the gumption to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, they're bombarded. I can't remember his name. Udo something. He was a German journalist. I think he's passed away now, but he outed the extent of American CIA control of the media for decades in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the kind of bile we saw there, it's layers and layers of trust being eroded by acid. I mean, that's such a psychopathic bluff. Like, that's obviously written by...
Don't you trust me?
Yeah. It's not just a NATO diplomat saying it. They've got German erstwhile intelligentsia wrapped around their fingers as well.
Mm-hmm.
They're either confused or they're bought and paid for.
Talking about bile, we move on to World Economic Forum.
Yes, let's the event of the year. It's my favorite time of the year, actually. When our lizard overlords gather
at Davos in the snowy Alps to pontificate on how the world's going to be, our vision for the future.
They got everything.
Come with us.
They got everything. What you're going to eat, how you're going to heat your home.
Yeah. Here's one of the biggest, well, there's a lot of bile spewers there, but here's one of the biggest bile spewers. And of course, he's been spewing bile for a very long time, way longer than he should be allowed to. But here he is. Get some of this.
600 600,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding every single day on the Earth. That's what's boiling the oceans, creating these atmospheric rivers and the rain bombs and sucking the moisture out of the land and creating the droughts and melting the ice and raising the sea level and causing these waves of climate refugees predicted to reach 1 billion in this century. Look at the xenophobia and political authoritarian trends that have come from just a few million refugees. What about 1 billion? We would lose our capacity for self-governance on this world. We have to act.
Al Gore shitting his pants at the WEF. Definitely. He's excited. He's super excited, super stoked, and quite angry. He put in everything there apart from Putin. Look at the zenith, 6 million bombs, atomic rivers, bombs, immigration, oceans rising, oceans falling, fucking volcanoes, fuck Putin everywhere. I mean, Jesus, we gotta do something about all that shit.
What the hell was the 600,000 Hiroshima bombs about? What was he?
That's global warming. That's the amount of
boiling the ocean. Oh yeah,
the amount of energy that is being trapped because of greenhouse gases. Because what about the ozone layer? Remember the ozone layer?
No, because they realized that it's a natural thing.
Whatever. 600,000 atomic bombs first of all they destroyed the ozone layer and then they put it back and now they're boiling the oceans and the polar bears and the ice caps and the rising oceans and the falling oceans and the falling land and the rising land and the tornadoes and the sinkholes and the frickin' meteorites and Putin and Ukraine and Germany and COVID and fuck, we have to act, Neil. Come on. What else do I need to say? All of that was caused by
global warming. Yeah, it was. You did it. It was a rousing speech. What does he want us to do?
Fucking act, will you?
Act like him.
Put on and worked up, yeah.
Get worked up.
Get spittle. Start flecking people with your spittle.
What strikes me is that I think he really believes what he's saying.
You'd think after it'd be a good act he's been putting on for over 20 years. He never shut up about it for 20 years, and he's out of politics. Well, technically out of politics, but then he's probably making a lot of money from it too. You know, it's hard to tease it out. You know, whether it's complicated. You know,
yeah.
If you asked him himself, he'd say, "Well, it's complicated. You know, it does give me a paycheck, a pretty large paycheck at the end of every month, but I also believe it." But he'd say to himself, "But hang on, do I believe it because of the paycheck, or is it the other way around?" I don't know. I can't really tell you. I mean, you have to sit him down, put him down on the couch and say, Al, listen, I want to explore this psychologically. Do you actually believe, I want to explore the depths of your psyche. Do you actually believe that global warming is a threat to the world? Is that why you're going around shouting about it? Or is it because you're making shitloads of money from it? Is that why you're going around shouting about it? What is it? Is it personal investment, personal gain? Or is it really heartfelt belief? And are the two, can you really separate the two? Can we separate money and your heart, Al? Is there any difference between the two? Between money and your heart? Is your heart actually made of greenbacks? If we opened you up now and would we just find a bunch of squashed up like $100 bills and where your heart is? That's what we need to discover. I want you all to go home and take a good long hard look in the mirror and ask yourself these deep questions, because otherwise you're going to give yourself a fucking heart attack if you keep going around places like this shouting about 600,000 atomic bombs.
It's okay. Zero Red Fox in the comments says, stop boiling the polar bears with your xenophobia.
Yeah, exactly.
Trabzon says, give Al Gore the Nobel Prize to shut him up. That's a good point, actually. Maybe that's what he's acting for.
Let's shove it down his throat.
The Nobel Prize is now an acting award, right?
It's a medal. It would probably just be big enough to throttle him, to block his esophagus, block his windpipe. Sorry. Here, I'll eat this. You'll feel better.
There's a nugget of info in that morass of mayhem.
Xenophobia
from Al Gore. The billion climate refugees. Remember we talked about that a couple of years ago when the WEF, and others first. The World Bank put out a study as well. They're talking about 1 billion climate refugees. I'm like, what the fuck are they talking about? And we looked at it and it looked like they're obviously using AGW nonsense for their model output. But the doom angle on this was more than just in by 2100 or something, there'll be 1 billion refugees. They're like, no, it's coming. It's pretty imminent, you know. They were so sure about that kind of surety. Again, is it a money making? I don't know, but that prediction was first touted a couple of years ago. I think pre-COVID. And then he referenced it again now. What, do these people hear something in their rarefied places, about like catastrophe way beyond what even their rising sea levels? It's just
that's what supposedly would call or would cause 1 billion climate refugees, right? They're models, right? But you're wondering where they get that information from on how Al Gore is. So Al Gore's been spent the last, what year is this? 18 years. Throw this up, Scotty. It's more than 18 years old, actually. What is it now? 2004. It's 2004. Now the Pentagon tells Bush climate change will destroy us. And in there is a reference to mass migration.
Britain will be Siberian in less than 20 years.
Yeah. Well, that didn't pan out, but...
Global warming?
They don't really know, but this is the kind of thing they're working off, They've had their models for quite a long time.
But I suspect they had different models, though.
Yeah. Well, who?
Insider, outsider models. Because remember, there was a Bilderberg minutes where they said, on our minutes for this year's meeting, global cooling.
Yeah. But either way, the migrants, the billion migrants, they'll run just as quick from the snow as they will from the burning sun. From the drought-stricken land to the ice-covered tundra, they'll run just as quick. So it doesn't matter. Either way, climate catastrophe is imminent, as is the 1 billion refugees swarming like mosquitoes out of the jungle towards your beautiful garden, Neil, where you're sitting in your first world deck chair in your lovely European garden, in your first world, outside in your comfy outside lounger with your pina colada, your pint of Guinness, and you don't realize that towards your beautiful European garden, 1 billion mosquitoes are coming. And this is what Al is trying to warn you about.
Yeah.
Your house will be ungovernable.
Well,
there'll be no more lazy days in the evening, summer evenings in the garden.
The people on the move now are mostly fleeing from America's actions.
Yeah. But
that's a sick thing. They're going to fold this into any potential environmental catastrophic, cascading natural disaster scenario, if it's indeed on the cards. They're going to fold it into, say, the climate. You see, we were right all along. But people are not fleeing anywhere now. They're fleeing wars. The consequence of America's wars.
Yeah, for sure. That's true. But that global warming, are we allowed to say that on YouTube? Global warming's a hoax?
I don't know.
2 strikes and you're nearly out.
People have been saying that to us for a long time.
Yeah, so maybe they got over that by now, have they?
Yeah.
They've calmed down about that. Well, it's not that it's a hoax. I mean, obviously there is significant climate change occurring. The question is whether or not it's man-made, but we don't need to get into that. The problem is that what do you do about it?
Act.
Well, apparently the latest thing you should do about it. Well, first thing we've had to do about it for quite a long time is stop using fossil fuels, blow up Nord Stream 1, shut off Europe from cheap Russian oil and gas, but not just shut them off and force them to use green energy, force them to use American oil and gas, because it's a lot dirtier and more expensive, and that's good for the environment apparently. Anyway, there's a lot of hypocrisy around that aspect, obviously, not least of which all these people flying to Davos in their private jets. But anyway, it's what you do about it. Now, it seems to me that, the only way you could justify doing away with fossil fuels, and most recently, stop using gas cookers, and go for electric cookers, right? The same way you're meant to stop using home heating oil and diesel, burners. What do you call them? What's the word?
Boilers.
Yeah. Fuel boilers and home heating boilers and gas in your house to heat your home or to cook with. You have to get rid of all that and use renewables. The only way that would make sense, or would be reasonable, you might get people to go along with that, is if you could convince them that it's going to get warmer. If it's going to get colder overall, globally, then that's a really bad idea.
And they've succeeded so far.
Yeah,
I guess.
So, and of course, global warming is, again, is it a thing? We've had very cold winters. Of course, they themselves admit that global warming, or rather climate change, manifests with hot spells and also very cold spells and a lot of rain, basically general climate chaos. Given that so it's chaotic and you don't really know what's going to happen, you can't be sure, I mean, they try and say that it's going to warm overall, but it doesn't seem to be the case. And anyway, in wintertime, they admit that you can get much colder winters as a result of climate change. So that doesn't seem like a good idea to rely on solar panels or wind turbines when you might have an extended, long, cold winter in the northern hemisphere as a result of climate change. Even as a result of man-made global warming. Even if we did it, if it's our fault, I don't think it's a good idea to kill ourselves off to pay for it by freezing as a result of cutting ourselves off from fossil fuels, which are a much more reliable and efficient, well, not efficient necessarily, but much more reliable, arguably efficient source of heating yourself over a long, extended winter. But yeah, that's it. And what's interesting though, I mean, you probably heard the thing this week about, in America, just swept America about
gas stoves.
Gas stoves, yeah. It was crazy. I saw some articles saying they're worse than the pollution. Talking about pollution from gas stoves is worse than don't know what it's worse than actually. It's worse than car pollution or being outside or whatever. There you have it. Did I send it to you? Gas hobs could be worse for your lungs than polluted city streets. So he claims that if no gas stoves were used, then up to a fifth of childhood asthma cases could be prevented. Now, what I see with this, and this is in the UK, they just took it up, but it started across America, and it just became a sudden meme last week, which is bizarre. Just spread around because the Biden White House decided to just all of a sudden tell people that using gas stoves was deadly.
Yeah.
But with them trying to stop using gasoline for your cars or diesel for your cars, fossil fuel for your cars, basically make you buy electric cars, and now to tell you to stop using gas burners and instead use electric. Both of those say move away from fossil fuels to electric for your very basic needs. Let's say very basic in terms of heating your house and with heat pumps, whatever, for your house. So heating your house on electric, feeding yourself, cooking your food with electric, and driving your car with electric. All of which there's a common theme amongst in that, which is you no longer have independent control over and access to how you do those things.
Yeah.
How you heat your house, feed yourself, and drive your car. If you have, just buy yourself a, 500-gallon tank or whatever, or 1,000-liter tank or whatever, and put diesel in it or gasoline in it, get it delivered from somebody who supplies you, someone who sells diesel or gasoline, and then get a tank in your garden full of natural gas for your house or for your stove. You are independent for at least a period of time. You can actually be independent on those three things: heating your home, cooking your food, and driving your car. You don't need any, you have the resources at home and you can, depending on how much you want to keep or store, you can have it for a significant amount of time. What they're saying is, no, that's all bad. You're destroying the planet, you're evil. You're xenophobic because you hate migrants because you're causing them to flee their countries and swarm across your garden, and you hate your garden as well. So you need to get rid of all those and rely on electricity, which comes down a line into your house. And ultimately, even though there can be private electricity companies, etc., it's controlled by someone else. And ultimately, in many places in Europe at least, probably in the US as well, controlled by the federal government or the government. So they can ration. They want you to go away from independence, energy independence, cooking, heating, driving, to energy reliance on government. Pretty simple. That's the end result. Like
the common denominator.
Yeah. And it's justified by, you're going to destroy the planet if you don't do this. And it's at that line where you go, okay, sounds a bit suspicious, generally a bit suspicious of government anyway, bit of a libertarian, don't really want much government influence or control or intrusion on my life, therefore no thanks, therefore I don't believe you. Therefore, actually, there appears to be a counter-narrative to what you're saying about why this is happening and why we need to do this, and that there's a reasonable argument to say that you're full of shit and your narrative is bullshit. It's just a narrative, and therefore the only thing that's consistent is you want me to be reliant on you for my energy needs, which goes against who I am. Therefore, take a hike. That's a conspiracy theory, right? That's with the, you could even apply that with COVID, and we're not saying one way or another about COVID or vaccines or anything. We're not making any particular statement on that. But there are people who, on Twitter, actually, Scott Adams came out and kind of said, okay, you guys, the people who are skeptical about the vaccine seem to have ended up in a better position than people who took the vaccine. And he said, you used heuristics and I used data. I used data and you used heuristics, which isn't really true. It's the opposite. But anyway,
right.
He was trying to say, well, it's complicated how you did that. And it's like, it's not complicated, Scott, at all. It's not really complicated at all. In the same way, like I just said with energy, you just look at a situation and you see if an authority is what they're saying, if you can just follow it down a few steps and see that it puts you in a bind, that it makes you dependent on them, then the next step is, okay, do I fully trust that authority
with my dependence,
with that dependence, with the influence, with the control they have over me? Yes or no? Are you willing to bet your life on it, basically? Yes or no? That's what it comes down to, yes or no. It's not complicated at all. And the same applies to the COVID thing.
How much do you love your government? Are you willing to trust them with your life?
Yeah, exactly.
That should be the only poll. They should forget elections.
How much do you believe that?
Just ask them people that question.
Yeah, and how much do you believe that your government really, really loves you and really cares about you individually and would really go the extra mile to do what is really necessary for you and for your well-being and that of your family? Are you willing to are you willing to give responsibility for, the basics of your daily existence to the government? Do you want to do that? Do you think it's a good idea? Would you ever want to do that? So it's not complicated,
No,
it's pretty simple.
That should definitely be the only question asked of people going forward, because that's all the elections and the referenda and the proposals, and then just ask people that question. Yes or no.
Well,
see what they say. Any
situation or any government policy that ends up with people in that position, then the question should be asked. You know what I mean? Or that should be the question that's put to the public. Look, what the government wants to do here will put you in a situation where you're entirely dependent for your very basic daily needs on the government. Are you willing to trust that they won't just, for whatever reason they might come up with, switch off the supply line and you'd be in serious problems? Are you willing to trust these? They're not faceless bureaucrats, but they're bureaucrats, and you don't know them. They're not your friends. You're just, you literally are a number to them. Are you willing to trust them are you willing to extend a kind of trust that you would extend to a family member, to Boris Johnson? Do you think he really cares about you? Do you think Joe Biden really loves you? Some American citizen, one of 320 million American citizens, ask any one of them, do you think Joe Biden cares about you individually? Do you think he knows? Well, obviously he doesn't know you, right? You never met him. Do you think you could appeal to him? Do you want to write a letter to him? Tell him who you are? Mention that you're one of 320 million other plebes, and that you really trust that he will, he has it in his heart. He's got a big enough heart to accommodate all 320 million Americans and really feel for them and do what's right by them. And if any of them are in particular difficulties, he will solve your problem. Is that, do you want to read another fairy story? Like, I mean, how old are you? Do you read adult books ever? So,
it's clear for me now. I've made my choice. Thanks,
okay.
Joe.
Well, It's up to you. I'm just.
I love my government.
Okay,
So
well, as long as I've got that, yeah.
there's something about failed former Democrat candidates in U.S. elections. Like Al Gore, we just saw. Here's John Kerry in Davos last week.
Oh, Jesus.
What in the hell? I mean, this makes Al Gore make sense. God knows what else he was saying, but this is a clip from his informal
And when you
speech.
stop and think about it, it's pretty extraordinary that we, select group of human beings,
Who?
because of whatever touched us at some point in our lives,
Okay,
are
touched,
able
all
to
right.
sit in a room and come together and actually talk about saving the planet. I mean, it's so almost extraterrestrial to think about, quote, saving the planet. And if you said that to most people, they think you're just a crazy tree-hugging, lefty, liberal, do-gooder, whatever. And there's no relationship. But really, that's where we are.
Very interesting. Yes. Play it again.
I think he just went aliens.
Play it again. Doesn't want to play again. Refresh. Twitter does that.
And when you stop and think about it, it's pretty extraordinary that we, select group of human beings,
Pause there.
because of
We select group of human beings. I mean, is he so detached from the people? Most people aren't aware of the World Economic Forum and Davos. They're not aware that it's going on, but there's a significant minority of people who are active on social media, et cetera, who are aware of what's going on. And a lot of them, a significant, I don't know if a significant minority or even a majority of that minority of people who are aware of it probably go, this is a bit dodgy. I mean,
It's a bit elitist.
it's a bit elitist, and they're all, and
doesn't resonate with
and I would
me.
like to hear something from them to show that they resonate with me, the average, the common man type thing. And then he comes out with, we select group of individuals. It's like, no, it's not. You're not doing the conspiracy theorists. Well, you're actually helping the conspiracy theorists. Let's say
100%.
you're not doing yourselves any favors. You're not putting anybody's mind at ease that you're not a select group of group of human beings meeting together in secret, having backroom discussions on what to do with the common on the grit unwashed out there. Keep going.
whatever touched us at some point in our lives.
Stop there. Yeah, in Ireland, there's a phrase "touched in the head," and it means you're there's something wrong with you, and I think it actually goes back to maybe some kind of folklore or whatever, where like fairies or something touch people and make you go bonkers, and fairies obviously would be, for people who know, would be a kind of reference for, be lumped in there with like kind of paranormal activity basically, and including aliens and stuff like that, UFOs and stuff, So it's basically, he's talking about the select group of human beings having been touched at some point in their lives that caused them all to get together in this high mountain retreat in the eagle's nest.
Outside Zurich.
Yeah. Yeah, come on. See what they're doing. Go ahead.
Are able to sit in a room and come together and actually talk about saving the planet. I mean, it's so almost extraterrestrial to think about, quote, saving the planet. And if you said
that's
that
weird.
to most
Pause there.
people,
So we select group of people who have all been in some way or other,
Touched by fairies.
touched by some weird demonic powers who made us all get together in a mountain retreat
To
and conspire together about saving the planet. And I know it sounds crazy, but isn't it great? Yeah, good job, John. Really put my mind at ease there. I'm glad. I'm willing now to just sit back and let you guys carry on.
At this point,
do what's best for us.
I
all.
just need to go through Twitter for a few minutes every day and just retweet their own statements. I mean, there's nothing else you can do. You don't need to add anything or clarify anything. Extraterrestrial. I suppose what he meant to say was that, fate or destiny or some kind of divine or higher inspiration has motivated us.
It's weird,
do something. But he used the word extraterrestrial, which is obviously associated with paranormal.
Right.
He's such an idiot materialist that he doesn't understand the implications of his use of words.
Yeah. Well, he's it's like he something. He's under some. They're under some kind of. He can't understand himself, but he feels that he's under some kind of an influence.
Yeah.
It's like I'm under some kind of an influence to get together. All of us here, we're under kind of a weird influence that makes us get together. And I myself even think it's totally weird that I would be standing here in this room, talking to other people, and we're all kind of conspiring about how to save the world. It's weird. I don't know where I got this idea from, but I'm gonna run with it.
Yeah.
And see what happens.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can stomach the next one because this is, what did you describe John Kerry as? These people who outside of politics or former politicians or former. It's weird. Here's another one.
Oh. Well,
we need to know who's been vaccinated and who hasn't been. Some of the vaccines that will come on down the line will be multiple. There'll be multiple shots. So you've got to have, for reasons to do with the healthcare more generally, but certainly for a pandemic or for vaccines, you've got to have a proper digital infrastructure, and many countries don't have that. In fact, most countries don't have that.
There you go. Commander Blair of the Galactic Command, Extraterrestrial Galactic Command. He wants to do, just play at the start again. We probably have to refresh to get it started again. He just blurts it out that it's only
the commonality segment. With the other two is that they're become from nominally progressive politics.
What do we want, Blair? What do we need?
You need to know who's been vaccinated and who hasn't been.
Okay.
Some vaccines that will come on down the line.
In like a database or something.
Be multiple shots. So
multiple shots.
For reasons to do with the healthcare more generally, but certainly for a pandemic or for vaccines, you've got to have a proper digital infrastructure, and many countries don't have that. In fact, most countries don't have that.
Digital infrastructure, you mean a database. So you want to have it. So you're sitting up in your mountain retreat with John Kerry and all Klaus Schwab, you're commander of the Galactic Command, and Lord Blair of Uranus.
He is now a lord, isn't he?
Lord Blair of the play. No, I won't say the plays. Anyway, Lord Blair is planning after John Kerry once was wondering why we're all here, touching the head, want to save the world. It's weird. It's extraterrestrial. Blair now wants to create a database of everybody on the planet, showing how many vaccines they've had, how many medical procedures, or how many medical treatments they've taken, specific medical treatments. Brand new medical treatments that have never been rolled out in the population before this past few years. Gene editing, effectively. Gene therapy, let's call it. And he wants a database to know who's had it and who hasn't. Have I seen this movie? I think I've seen this movie, no?
X-Files. For one. Yeah, it's almost like watching them just spout tropes. From sci-fi.
From sci-fi
or
movies.
any dystopian.
Hollywood, yeah. What about this one?
Do you have the Siemens guy?
Yeah, he's next. But we'll see that these guys go global. These guys talk about saving the planet. Check out what these guys are standing in front of. Ooh.
Dear friends, scientifically, this is not a climate crisis. We are now facing something deeper. Mass extinction, air pollution, undermining ecosystem function, really putting humanity's future at risk. This is a planetary crisis.
No!
This is a safety crisis, but above all, it is also a justice crisis. Many areas in the world are uninhabitable. This uninhabitable zone is increasing. If we continue with our greenhouse gas emissions, then by 2070, as many as 3 billion people will live in uninhabitable zones.
uninhabitable zones. But how can they live in uninhabitable zones? What the hell are you talking about? And what about the 1 billion mosquito refugees? What about the 1 billion refugees? Where are they going to live? If like the non-refugees are already living in uninhabitable, inhabiting uninhabitable zones, where does that put the billion refugees? These get pushed off the planet. I mean, there's not much lower you can go than an uninhabitable zone.
No. Or the Arctic, which will have melted by then.
Yeah. You'd be living inside polar bears.
It's just
the dead carcasses of polar bears.
At least John Kerry acknowledges that, we don't really know what the hell we're talking about.
Yeah.
The rest of them, though, are so sure, But then, like you say, when there's checks to cash in.
They're touched in the head. Yeah, put that dude up.
Yeah, this is interesting as well, because here you've got this guy, he's purely from the corporate world.
Covering all the bases.
The rest are all NGO or former, quote-unquote, progressive politicians. This next one is from the chairman of Siemens, German multinational, with some bullshit story about how he became vegetarian, but have a listen.
It's a very important point that you are addressing. My daughter, 24, inspired me and said, Dad, how can you advocate for these zero carbon value chains if you still eat meat? And so I stopped eating meat. Now the math would say, well, you need to stop eating meat 11 years to compensate for a flight to Thailand. Yes.
Or Davos.
But if 1 billion people stop eating meat, I tell you it has a big impact. Not only does it have a big impact on the current food system, but it will also inspire innovation of food systems. And I predict that we will have proteins not coming from meat in the future. They will probably taste even better. So why are we trying to mimic meat if we can have a better taste? They will be zero carbon and much healthier than the kind of food that we eat today. That is a mission that we need to get on. I can inspire you to maybe look at an organization called EAT, easy to remember, EAT, who have all the facts on this and who have the policies necessary, the innovations necessary, and the scale necessary in order to make food systems sustainable and healthy.
It's all worked out.
It'd be really boring at a dinner party.
Thank you so much, Jim. And you're right. EAT is really a great foundation. You should all really look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Immigrants. Eat the immigrants. No? Zero carbon. That's definitely reducing your carbon footprint.
The matter-of-fact way he just said, the policies are already there. We have the plans. We just need to start doing it. I mean,
my daughter
meat really is overrated. We have come up with something much better. He said, who is so arrogant? Are you kidding me?
They're there to save the world, Neil.
That's unbelievable.
They're the world saviors. They all got God complexes.
They also did.
His daughter. Put him straight on. I wonder if his daughter friends with Greta.
No doubt.
But she said, how can you advocate this zero carbon business if you still eat meat? And I went, I
must live my philosophy.
That is very good, my daughter, because the obvious connection between eating meat and carbon is very, very clear, isn't it, darling? Yes, my daughter. And it's like, no, it's not.
Not at all.
Why don't you explain
Neither
that
is
to
the
me?
connection between CO2 and what drives climate, but they're just these people have moved off into this touched reality. That's just all we can do is just admire the
delusion, the
absurdity of it,
the depth of their delusion.
Yeah. On the last week, you showed the scary clip of the father of this movement. If Greta is the mother, the father is Schwab. Although that clip, as I pointed out, with him railing about the dangers of a massive global cyber pandemic was actually something he got out first in June 2020.
Right.
While everyone was trapped in their homes, handy time to prepare for the next thing, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
At this year in Davos, they did the same thing. They had some side meeting on the same thing, predicting catastrophic global cyber attacks. We've probably heard all this before, but let's see if there's any update to their spiel. I don't know who these people are, mind you. Many famous names. Let's see.
We're here today to share the findings of the World Economic Forum's Global Security Outlook Report 2023. This is a result of research in collaboration with the forum's communities and our partner Accenture, in which we've interviewed and sought input from over 300 executives globally. The most striking finding that we found is that 93% of cyber leaders and 86% of cyber business leaders believe that the geopolitical instability makes a catastrophic cyber event likely in the next 2 years.
Huh. So geopolitical instabilities, well, he kept it neutral, but that's obviously with NATO versus Russia in mind, and potentially China down the road. So Klaus Schwab, these guys are all WEF. Klaus Schwab is WEF. In 2020, he's predicting a massive global. I don't know what he was citing then as the cause for terrorism. That was in the tail end of the war on terror. But now it's shifted. You see, the plausible narrative would be war, or fallout from NATO versus Russia. That's something that could happen this year. We might see that, because I mean, at some point, if it's going to escalate, one of the next targets that would be fair game would be space-based satellites, also ground relays and stuff like that. And maybe not necessarily Russians shooting rockets down, but trying to take them out with Trojan viruses or something like that, or malware or whatever, however they would hack the systems, and vice versa. Well, we know it's a fact that there is massive cyber attacks happen definitely every day. But the direction is almost one way. It goes from the United States to Russia,
right?
In that direction.
Well, if a cyber attack takes out the electricity grid, for example, electric grid, you'd want to have some fossil fuels on hand, no?
Exactly. I mean,
everything
they argue,
everything,
the things they argue for in the broad strokes should be sending you in the opposite direction to the one they're trying to put you in a bind to.
They're basically warning you about all these deadly, all these disasters that are, potentially, will befall humanity, and all of the solutions to them for the average person are solutions that will not work in the event that disaster befalls humanity.
Yeah.
It would be the opposite of what you would want.
Yeah. And these are our geniuses.
Well, they're obviously, there's a certain kind of genius, I suppose, but
touched ones
who don't want what's best for you,
I wonder if this is related. You remember the thing with do you want to say something?
Go ahead.
Why were all the US planes grounded on January 11th for several hours?
Yeah.
First time since 9/11.
Went to Canada as well, no?
Happened, resulting in widespread flight delays. Went to Canada. Well, it happened so close in time that it made it your mind went, well, it must be related. Officially, they're not. Let's send this first one to Scott. This is about the US incident. From NPR, a damaged file may have caused the outage in an FAA system, leading to travel chaos, and there's no update on that since. So, Transport Secretary Buttigieg, it was his statement to the press. He suggested the damaged file to a NOTAM, that's Notice to Aviation, I'm not sure what it stands for, database. Basically, NOTAM system warns of any threats in the air or something. And that was down, therefore the FAA ordered nationwide pause on all domestic flights. First time since 9/11. Okay, so same day, but not the same time. Canada has its own separate NOTAM system.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really linked. All things are linked because of the internet and stuff, but I'm pretty sure that this, to keep it secure, that's separate. This is from CBC Canada. On the same day, its NOTAM system briefly went down at a different time, though. And the authorities there gave the reason that they said specifically there's no connection with the US issue and blamed, quote, computer hardware failure. Okay. One last incident actually was the first one chronologically on New Year's Day in the Philippines. I didn't know this. I saw Tucker Carlson reference it. All aircraft were grounded in the Philippines New Year's Day, and the reason given there was, quote, a power outage cut communication lines.
Mm-hmm.
For different reasons in all three cases. Zero follow-up. It's one of those glitches, that makes you wonder, are they testing something now? Was it powered down deliberately or not? Maybe it was this is what the thing about the whole cyber pandemic thing is, like, if you look at it this way, if you don't trust these guys, that you suspect, you're suspicious, and so you put your conspiracy theory tinfoil hat on, you think they're up to something. They're going to do it themselves, right? They're prepping you psychologically for something they're going to do. Okay, that's if that's that way inclined. But there's another possibility. They know something they won't share, which is that they have reasonably good, plausible reasons for making such freaking alarmist statements. Okay, some of them are horse hockey, rising sea levels, whatever. But a global cyber pandemic, or however they call it, cyber attack or something, or systems going down suddenly. What is that obsession with things suddenly and possibly imminently? Like these guys, Al Gore's talking like it's in his lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
You get that from him, right? He expects to see dividends on this in his lifetime. So this is imminent in the near, like not 100 years hence. It's in the next few years kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But what the hell are they thinking? Like they do really seem to be worried about sudden impact to communications, energy supply, food, etc.
Yeah.
I don't think these guys are just purely, the full conspiracy theory take is, it's all just pure greed and money, and they're touched by something, they're touched by idiocy, and they're just doing it because it's a hysteria. At the root of all this is just pure lefty liberal tree hugging, as Kerry himself described, hysteria. And there's no need for it, for God's sake. There's no need for any of it. It's just purely phantasmagorical. We're all sick. But for us, indeed, like the climate science believers say, but for us, the earth will be fine. There's no problem out there in objective reality. It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
We're the problem. It's all in our heads and we're sick,
Yeah.
So the two are in agreement, actually, on that point, ironically. It's all just man-made. It's just one is saying it's all man-made and we can fix it, and the other one says it's all man-made. It's hysteria.
It's all man-made what? Hysteria?
It's just pure. It's all a hoax. If you just calm down, go out, enjoy the sunset, there's nothing to worry about. I wonder if there is something objectively to worry about, but these idiots have got their read on it completely wrong.
Well, main thing I would worry about is them. You know what I mean? Because it's not just because you suggest that say that they're a bit crazy, that they've lost the plot, they're hysterical, whatever, doesn't mean that they won't. They aren't, and they are pushing through policies that have a very bad prognosis for ordinary human beings. You know what I mean? So whether or not it's real, these people are dangerous. Check this out. We'll move on to. We'll see if we can move on to it. I suppose we can a little bit. We'll see how we can navigate it. YouTube mightn't like it, but we'll see. This is. Do you know who Dr. Peter Hotez is?
No, should I?
Come on, Neil. Anyway, he's a American scientist, pediatrician, and advocate in the fields of global health, blah, blah. He serves as founding dean of the National School of Tropical Medicine. He's a professor of pediatrics, molecular biology, and microbiology at blah, blah, blah.
It sounds like a conspiracy theorist.
And he was big man in the in the COVID-19 response. He actively used his public profile on Twitter to help combat misinformation about the COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay.
He just, I don't know if he produced this or who produced this, but you can play it there and we'll see.
We have to recognize that anti-vaccine activism, which I actually call anti-science aggression, has now become a major killing force globally. During the COVID pandemic in the United States, 200,000 Americans needlessly lost their lives because they refused a COVID vaccine, even after vaccines became widely available. And now the anti-vaccine activism is expanding across the world, even into low and middle income countries. It's a killing force. Anti-science now kills more people than things like gun violence, global terrorism, nuclear proliferation, or cyber attacks. And now it's become a political movement. In the US, it's linked to far extremism on the far right, same in Germany. So this is a new face of anti-science aggression. And so we need political solutions to address this.
And backed by the World Health Organization. So it's anti-science aggression. If you have questions about vaccines, it's anti-science aggression. It's not just anti-vaccine, anti-science aggression. You're worse than terrorists, worse than nuclear proliferation, and worse than global warming, and worse than you're worse than Al Gore.
Is that the same or worse than microaggression?
It's much worse than microaggression.
It's much worse.
Yes, but you're worse than it. You're a terrorist, basically. Anti-science aggression terrorist. If you think for even 1 second that there's anything to question about the vaccines. Apparently 200,000 people died in America because they didn't get the vaccine. Now, where he gets those figures or if there's any data to back it up, we don't know because he doesn't present it. He just says it in the same way he calls you a terrorist. Worse than terrorist. You're worse than a nuclear bomb.
Did you notice at the end of that it said World Health Organization?
Yeah, exactly. Backed by the World Health Organization. Right. This is all.
That's all you need to know. They're the authorities.
Yes. So the only thing I have to say about that is, where's my? There it is. The only thing I have to say about that is, well, I'm going to make a terrorist statement, obviously. A nuclear waste loving terroristic statement, and it's actually backed up by science, but this is just more anti-science aggression. If you use science to question science, it's anti-science aggression. So anyway, there's a paper published 22nd December in Science Direct. It just says extended SARS-CoV-2 or BD booster vaccination induces humoral and cellular immune tolerance in mice. Short version of that, and this further down in the, I think it's in the, you can find it in the paper, but I'll just quote from the paper here. It says, we found the conclusions basically. We found that protective effects from the humoral immunity and cellular immunity, i.e. basically all of your immune system, established by the conventional immunization were both profoundly impaired during the extended vaccination course. Profoundly impaired is bad, right?
Yes, that's not good.
Was basically, so humoral immunity and cellular immunity, like innate immune system, and the other one is cellular immunity, were profoundly impaired during the extended vaccination course. So 3 booster, second booster, bad in mice. But then the question is, you could say that's just mice, but the FDA only required testing on mice to okay the booster. So we should look into it based on these results?
Yeah.
Or is that anti-science aggression?
I demand
if it is anti-science aggression, and if it is akin to nuclear waste and global terrorism and global warming and volcanoes, then it's not me who's saying it. You two would have to take up that grievance with the authors of this study, which was published in Science Direct last month. That's all I have to say. and it's probably more than enough to get us booted. Well, there's one more thing I have to say. Australia, summertime, right?
Right.
Summertime in Australia. This isn't new because we've reported on it in other places, but
has helped fuel a rise in the number of fatal cardiac arrests across the country, according to a new report. Let's bring in today's Ashlyn Krukellis in Brisbane for us. Morning, Ashlyn. What are health experts saying?
Yes, Ashley.
Jane, they say the data is concerning, and that's because it shows within the first 8 months of 2022, more than 10,200 Australians died due to heart-related disease, and that number is considered 17% higher than what would be considered normal. In this report this morning, health experts say quite simply the pandemic increased risk factors. They include the virus itself. Some studies show that some people have a higher likelihood of heart disease or stroke after COVID-19 infection. Then there's the fact that some people delayed medical treatment and therefore delayed going and getting their usual health checkups and getting diagnosis and then treatment. And then to a lesser extent, there's the fact that hospitals were extremely busy during this time. Perhaps reassuringly, though, the Heart Foundation says 2022 also led to a surge in people getting heart checks. And Jane, that is certainly something they recommend everyone do.
Super duper. So yeah, all those causes of the 17% increase in strokes or heart problems in Australia is to do, all those different reasons: COVID, pandemic response, shutting down of hospitals, healthcare systems, almost said the word there, the virus itself. The virus itself is made up of many different parts, one of which is a spike protein, and that's actually a toxin, and it's the mechanism by which the virus enters cells, reproduce, etc. And that spike protein is in the vaccine, and that's probably not, that's too close to the real word. I should have said.
Call it the thing.
The thing. No, is that Maxine person? Anyway, so that can't be part of it, is all I'm saying. That can't be in any way. It certainly can't be mentioned anyway.
It can't be, no.
But then there is a new thing, a current thing, or a new thing, not the current thing, but the new thing that also is in fact a much better explanation for this increase in heart disease or heart complaints or strokes or heart attacks across the world, really, across the Western world in particular. Here it is from, again, this is from Canada. So we'll go to that other bastion of sciencey truthness, CBC News.
So what is this link between influenza, infection, and stroke?
Yeah, I didn't know about this either until last year, but it turns out that after flu season, about 3 or 4 weeks later, there is a stroke season. And like you said, most of Canada is getting down off of a big hump of flu. So now we're starting to see more strokes. And a friend of one of my colleagues actually mentioned that at work the other day. Said, have you noticed how many strokes we're seeing? It's a lot more than usual, it feels like. So anecdotally, we're starting to see that.
Yeah. That'll be the stroke season. So I was at work the other day and one of my colleagues was saying, holy shit, there's a lot of people dying from strokes. That's really, really a large number. It's amazing. What could have happened? I said, that'll be the stroke season. And he says, what do you mean the stroke season? And he says, I have no fucking clue what I'm talking about. I just made that up just this minute. But it seems to work because otherwise we would have to say something else. So to avoid saying that other thing,
say the thing.
We're going to call it stroke season. Yeah. So everybody should know that after you're coming down off a hump of flu season, you go straight into stroke season. And then after that, you get into diabetes season, and then from there you go into myocarditis season, and then Bell's palsy season, and then back into flu season again. So
it's hilarious. It's just these people are they're like aliens. Like I said before about American elites, they're so weird. And then they have all of us, in the binary where we're not allowed to talk about the thing that they're doing to everyone. We can see it.
Don't say the word.
Don't say the word. You know what it reminds me of? Years ago, there was a noticeable increase one particular year, but maybe it was a gradual increase over, let's say, the last decade and a half. I think it was around 2013, 14. There were some pretty impressive meteor fireballs seen all over the world, and they got reported on, you know. But it was like one after the other, and people were going, okay. They noticed that was new. So there were a flurry of news reports to reassure people that we were in the February fireball season.
Yes, season.
And I went to Wikipedia page, and they had just like created a brand new page, and people were furiously editing it to make it sound in the present continuous, like 'twas always so.
Yeah.
And they just made this shit up on the fly.
Make up a new term. Just throw one up just on this is related, obviously. No, just X that out in the right there. This, I had to control myself when I read this, as you might imagine. This is just from last week.
Read it out.
We are overcounting COVID deaths and hospitalizations. That's a problem.
That's in the Washington Post, no less.
That's in the Washington Post by Liana S. Wen, who is this American physician who was, she was a public health communicator during COVID pandemic and the 2022 monkeypox outbreak. She was on CNN all the time. She was just like front and center with the whole shut up and get your vaccine. So, but anyway, she's questioning. This headline is kind of galling for me because they're allowed to say this now. And if you want a heaping dose of cynical, then this idea, this claim of overcounting COVID deaths and hospitalizations was something that I and many other people repeatedly said over and over again all through 2020 and 2021 for 2 years, literally every freaking week, every day, whatever. With COVID, of COVID, are these actual COVID deaths, blah, 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 blah. And you're told to shut the hell up. And what do this pandemic and people are dying and shut up and you're an anti-vax conspiracy theorist, blah, 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 blah. And you got banned and shut down and censored for suggesting that the official COVID death statistics were in question because of the significant evidence that they were being overcounted, that people were dying of all sorts of other pre-existing conditions, and that COVID was simply like the flu or even the cold was the thing that was pushing these people who were had very low life expectancy, kind of one foot in the grave, pushing them off this mortal coil. And therefore that it couldn't reasonably be called a COVID death, and then it shouldn't be added to the statistics and shouldn't be used then to terrorize the people into being locked down in their homes and then also getting vaccines that they maybe didn't need. But now, Joe, you're allowed to say it now. Now you're allowed to say it. And why are you allowed to say it now?
Well, they'll say it's because we didn't know then.
Huh? No, the reason they're saying it now, and here's the heavy dose of cynicism or cynical, is because it's convenient for them to say it now, because after the rollout of the vaccines and the boosters, there should be no COVID.
Right.
But as the first paragraph kind of says there, according to the CDC, the United States has experienced around 400 COVID deaths every day. How can that be? We just rolled out the vaccine to save the whole planet. It stopped global warming. It was the best thing ever. Right? So there's no more COVID, right? No. Apparently, according to the CDC, we're getting 400 COVID deaths a day. How can that be happening when everybody's vaccinated? In fact, all those people who died, 400 a day, are all vaccinated. How can that be happening? Shut up. They didn't die of COVID. What are you talking about, you anti-vaxxer or you pro-vaxxer? What are you? It's confusing. I don't know what
You're an anti-science aggressor.
What are you doing? Anyway, shut up. Those aren't COVID deaths. They died of their diabetes. Yeah, but I said that 2 years ago. Shut up. It doesn't matter. It was different then. I can say it now. You couldn't say it then. Shut up. Because it's convenient for me now because we rolled out a vaccine. They shouldn't be dying. They are dying. No, they're not dying from COVID.
Yeah.
So
this is going
on. You know what I mean?
It's horrible.
When you weren't allowed to say that and now they're shoving it in your face in order to cover up the fact that the vaccines may not be doing as well as they could have been doing. Or as they were claimed to do.
There's actually Quantum Ryan commented, this is Leanna.
Yes.
Quote, I think I may have fucked up my kid when.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
There was that story. So even people who, right. Yeah.
She has no soul. She has no soul. Only other notable on the same topic, we'll just give a quick passing. Horsey Face, Mac Horse Face in New Zealand decided that she had enough.
Yes, Queen.
Yes, Queen in New Zealand decided that she had enough. She doesn't have any fuel in the tank for another term because she was going to get voted out anyway because New Zealanders had enough of her big horsey face.
Well, no, that's Joe. But the entire liberal media in the Anglosphere said she was hounded out by anti-science aggressors.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, of course that's happened. Yeah, not the New Zealand people who had enough of her and had enough of this kind of thing. Just play this. This is from a year ago or something.
I've got a number of questions about people refuse. What do we do if someone refuses to be tested? Well, they can't now. If someone refuses in our facilities to be tested, they have to keep staying. So they won't be able to leave after 14 days. They have to stay on for another 14 days. So it's a pretty good incentive. You either get your tests done and make sure you're cleared, or we will keep you in a facility longer. So I think people might they'll take the test.
Yeah, I'll take the test. Yeah, it's just, the test, and people will have to do the test, and if they don't get the test, we're going to keep them imprisoned indefinitely until they get the test. Yeah.
And all of this is because we're going to build back better.
Build back better.
Yes. Yeah.
Freak. And now I'm going to vanish my dick.
Freaks, they're all freaks. Good news, 11 Oregon counties have voted to secede. They're sick of Portland politics.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, not that it's going to go anywhere, bless them, but it's just telling that people want away from these types. Like, just get them out of I can't be near them.
What about, what's going on with Biden? Biden's on the way out, no?
No, he doubled down. He says, I don't care what they try, I'm running.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah,
well, they found more documents in his Wilmington home. In his home this time. Not in some lockup where he keeps his Corvette, but in his home. FBI searches Biden's Wilmington home and finds more classified documents, materials.
I don't know who it is. Maybe Carlson reckons they're doing a Watergate on him.
Yeah.
I don't know what. Is it really necessary?
Well, they got to have something to get rid of him, right?
They just withhold his meds or something.
Yeah. Carlson was on a roll this week. Did you see that one he did on Nixon?
No. I saw a few.
3 minutes. Do you want to play it?
Yeah.
Go
on. I don't have it. Do you have it? Oh.
Since Nixon got 17 million more votes than his opponent. Less than 2 years later, he was gone. He was forced to resign. And in his place, an obedient servant of the federal agencies called Gerald Ford took over the White House. How did that happen? Well, it's a long story, but here are the highlights, and they tell you a lot. Richard Nixon believed that elements in the federal bureaucracy were working to undermine the American system of government, and had been doing that for a long time. He often said that. He was absolutely right. On June 23, 1972, Nixon met with the then CIA Director Richard Helms at the White House. During the conversation, which thankfully was tape recorded, Nixon suggested he knew, quote, who shot John, meaning President John F. Kennedy. Nixon further implied that the CIA was directly involved in Kennedy's assassination, which we now know it was. Helms's telling response? Total silence. But for Nixon, it didn't matter because it was already over. 4 days before, on June 19th, the Washington Post had published the first of many stories about a break-in at the Watergate office building. Unbeknownst to Nixon and unreported by the Washington Post, 4 of the 5 burglars worked for the CIA.
Surprise.
The first of many dishonest Watergate stories was written by a 29-year-old Metro reporter called Bob Woodward. Who exactly was Bob Woodward? Well, he wasn't a journalist. Bob Woodward had no background whatsoever in the news business. Instead, Bob Woodward came directly from the classified areas of the federal government. Shortly before Watergate, Woodward was a naval officer at the Pentagon. He had a top-secret clearance. He worked regularly with the intel agencies. At times, Woodward was even detailed to the Nixon White House, where he interacted with Richard Nixon's top aides. Soon after leaving the Navy, for reasons that have never been clear, Woodward was hired by the most powerful news outlet in Washington and assigned the biggest story in the country. And just to make it crystal clear what was actually happening, Woodward's main source for his Watergate series was the deputy director of the FBI, Mark Felt. And Mark Felt ran, and we're not making this up, the FBI's COINTELPRO program, which was designed to secretly discredit political actors the federal agencies wanted to destroy, people like Richard Nixon. And at the same time, those same agencies were also working to take down Nixon's elected vice president, Spiro Agnew. In the fall of 1973, Agnew was indicted for tax evasion and forced to resign. His replacement was a colorless congressman from Grand Rapids called Gerald Ford. What was Ford's qualification for the job? Well, he had served on the Warren Commission, which absolved the CIA of responsibility for President Kennedy's murder. Nixon was strong-armed into accepting Gerald Ford by Democrats in Congress. Quote, "We gave Nixon no choice but Ford," Speaker of the House Carl Albert later boasted. 8 months later, Gerald Ford of the Warren Commission was the President of the United States.
And that's how you do it.
Yeah.
That's how democracy works. That's how you elect a new president. That's how the CIA elects a new president.
It was a great save
when
the deep state. It was a stupendous move, and it's only coming out now because it's only in recent years that some good books have looked at it again. I mean, remember, it's as recent as 10 years ago that Oliver Stone was still of the mindset that Nixon was a bad actor, and we dodged a bullet there with Nixon. But no, not at all. Nixon, definitely not a straight player. But that's because he was unlike Trump, really, of the political system. He was a political animal, but he also had an ounce of like America first decency in him. That's why he got reelected with 17. He won on a landslide. You know, when they show the map of which state goes red, the entire country was red. He got probably what Trump actually got in 2020. But anyway, he won like it was crystal clear. And then within 2 years, he's gone. Like, and then they rewrote the history of him being, an evil critter that all America disliked and stuff like that. Bullshit.
Yeah. Not only do they, that's how the CIA elects a new president. If they don't have to blow the previous one's head off to get a new one in, they do it.
It was another coup. And if you think about it, it's been a series of rolling coups since then. It's been unnecessary most of the time. But at the end of the 70s, they had to do something again. The October surprise that politically whacked Carter. Carter would have got a second term, but they made sure that the whole thing with the hostages in Iran and stuff like that, and Zbigniew Brzezinski was both his advisor and his helper, and probably the one who helped his downfall because he was conspiring with the neocons who were backing Reagan. So that was another one within the same decade.
Yeah, it's the deep state basically keeping.
This is how they do it, democracy.
Consolidating their control and keeping control
of secrets and
pushing in a certain direction and keeping control over the White House and the reins of power. Basically, they hold the reins of power. Anybody gets in the way, you're gone. So it's the idea of American democracy is one giant lie, basically, at least in the way that people think it works. It doesn't work that way at all. But it's been that way for a long time, and people are only waking up to it now. But hopefully, it's not too late. But for us, it is too late because it's been almost 2 hours or just about 2 hours. And I think we have talked about all the news that all the bile that's fit for us to kind of wade through and have to comment on and make fun of. Unless you've got something extra special left. No, I'm good.
All right. Maybe it's coming up soon. The new Japanese PM, East Asia could be the next Ukraine.
Yeah.
Like, don't know who
he hopes. Not Washington.
Yeah, it's weird. It's creepy. Like he's not. It's not a warning, and I don't want this coming to my country. It's like, bring this to my country.
Yeah.
So
the Germans need to get some kind of get some of that belligerence, the newfound belligerence that the Japanese had kept at a low ebb for the past 80 years as well. Japanese very pacifist. Second World War, very bad. Hiroshima, Nagasaki, we got bombed, not good. Let's all be peaceful and stuff. But now it's like,
but they're being encouraged by America.
I know,
because they want to throw them at China.
Right.
Germany is at least holding back from that.
But Germany should refine its belligerence, but in the opposite direction
towards Britain,
or towards the Americans.
Towards both.
Anyway, so we'll leave it there for this week, folks. Thanks for listening, chatting, and commenting. We will be back next week with another show on all that's been happening since then. So until then, have a great week and stay safe and watch out for Al Gore. Don't go near him. He's dangerous. So see you later. Bye.
Can't stop the signal now.